Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the New York City Alliance webinar on engaging youth and building youth leadership in prevention against sexual violence. We will begin shortly. Please remember to make sure that your computer is compatible with ReadyTalk, and you'll need to have Java installed. And please remember to dial in for audio and to sign into the web so that you can hear the recording and the webinar. So for audio, and for those who are already signed into the web, please dial in at the number listed on the screen and enter the access code. If you have not signed into the web yet, the access code that you will need is 682-8962. Just as a reminder, we strongly encourage you to type any questions or comments into the text chat window on the bottom left corner of the screen. These comments can only be seen by the facilitator and the guest panel. You can type questions throughout the presentation and they will be addressed as they come in. The slides will move automatically throughout the presentation, so you don't have to worry about that. And a recording of the webinar will be available on our website approximately a week from today. If you are having trouble logging into the webinar, please call the Alliance at 212-229-0345, extension 308, and we will be happy to assist you. The Alliance is proud to be designated by the New York State Department of Health as a Center of Excellence in Primary Prevention. At the Alliance, we envision a city free from sexual violence. And as an organization, our hope is to build the capacity of communities, organizations, and institutions to advance the right to live free from sexual violence and reduce the harm it causes to individuals, families, and society. In doing so, the Alliance is actively involved in primary prevention work. You can visit our website to access resources, our blog, and prevention newsletters. We also encourage you to sign up for our weekly digest for the latest information on webinars, conferences, and interesting articles. You can also post your own program announcements on our digest. So in today's webinar, we will learn about how youth engagement and leadership programs can be used as an effective tool for sexual violence prevention in our communities. We will explore key features of exciting and successful youth empowerment programs from across the country. Our guest speakers will talk about their programs and will share effective strategies for engaging youth from diverse communities. They will also give some helpful tips for training, evaluation, and sustainability. The panel will also speak about the challenges and limitations that are sometimes encountered when implementing these programs. Ultimately, we hope that by the end of this webinar, the importance of building youth leadership and engaging youth for sexual violence primary prevention will be super apparent and super clear, and we hope that it becomes something that you're not only interested in, but that you hope to incorporate into organizational practices. So before we get started, we wanted to get an idea of how many people are already engaging youth. So to do this, we did an informal poll of the web participants, and the results are reflected graphically on the screen. So as you can see, 77.8% have youth-centered programming within their organization, while 22.2% do not. So seeing that the large majority of respondents have youth engagement programs is actually really encouraging and reinforces the idea of why this movement is so critical and so popular and gaining so much steam. So in the next poll, we wanted to see what kinds of programs are being implemented by the organizations across the state. So a graphical representation of the types of youth-centered programming that the web participants have in their organizations is shown on the screen. Half are service provisions for youth, and 47% have youth leadership and peer mentoring programs, and 41% are youth organizing programs. So this is really great to see because it means that a lot of organizations are really interested in youth programming and they recognize the value in it. And after hearing about all of the inspiring programs from our guest speakers today, we hope that the 17.6% of those who don't currently have youth programming will really push for it because as we know, youth engagement is super, super important for prevention and changing social norms. So before we really get into things, it makes sense to identify why we need to care about this issue. Why is youth engagement so important? Why do we want to make sure that youth from our community can grow to be leaders? Well, as preventionists, our goal is to create sustainable social and behavioral changes within our communities. Within that larger social change framework, we know that youth engagement and empowerment can serve as tools for creating violence-free communities. But again, I'm sure everyone's thinking, so what? What does this all mean? What does this mean for me? Well, first, we know that statistics show that sexual and dating violence disproportionately impacts youth. And we also know that prevention should start early, before negative behaviors are adopted and ingrained. And on top of that, we also know that youth tend to be easily influenced. So if that's the case, we want to make sure that youth are exposed to good influences rather than negative ones as early as possible. Also, for those who work closely with youth, I'm sure you can attest to the fact that kids tend to listen more to their peers and to look to peers to see what's cool, what's trending, how should I behave, how should I act. And because of this, peer mentorship is often a very powerful tool for positive social change. Finally, research indicates that youth are more likely to disclose acts of sexual and dating violence to friends and peers rather than to adults. So from this perspective, it makes a lot of sense to equip youth with leadership skills and to teach them how to be a resource for those who need advice or guidance. And as we mentioned before, statistical research can oftentimes help us see why an issue is relevant. Why do we need to be concerned about it? And in a national representative survey of adults in 2012 that was administered by the CDC, close to half of reported rapes occurred before the age of 18, and approximately 80% of rapes occur prior to the age of 24. So these alarming statistics demonstrate that many sexual assaults are happening to young people and are actually being perpetrated by people in that very same age demographic. So again, these numbers are showing us why primary prevention at the earlier life stages is essential. We know as preventionists that effective prevention stops victimization and perpetration before it can even start. So we see that young people are being disproportionately impacted by sexual violence, and in knowing this, doesn't it make sense to target youth with primary prevention programs? And also as preventionists, we know that in order to initiate substantial social change, we must target the root causes of sexual and gender-based violence at all levels of the socio-ecological model. So in knowing that, it sort of makes sense to start the process as early as possible, like we said before, when individuals are still formulating a sense of what is appropriate. We want to reach out to them when they're still trying to figure out what is and what isn't socially acceptable behavior. And if we want to prevent harmful social norms from becoming ingrained, accepted, and uncontested, we need to focus prevention efforts on youth. engaging youth from a prevention standpoint can impede the development of harmful learned behavior. So, for example, the perceived social acceptance of street harassment. Let's say there are a group of kids hanging out on the corner and one of them starts catcalling a young woman. If a member of the group was exposed to an early prevention program and was aptly equipped with leadership skills, he might step up to the plate and confront his friend and let him know that what he's doing isn't cool. His actions are not okay. Perhaps his other friends would follow suit, which is ideally what we want. So basically, by engaging youth, you have the opportunity to lessen the likelihood that they will adhere to the detrimental and harmful beliefs and learned behaviors that foster this environment of sexual violence and rape culture. So as we said before, one of the main reasons why this topic matters to us is that youth often turn to friends in times of crisis. And because of this, it is important to develop leadership among youth. We want youth to feel comfortable confronting the root causes of sexual and dating violence, and we want to encourage them to challenge accepted harmful peer norms. And we also want them to feel comfortable helping a friend in need and guiding them to the resources and help that they need. So the Alliance had a hunch that youth were confiding in other youth, but we needed the numbers to prove it, and we needed something to back this up, particularly hard data. So in June 2008, the Alliance and Columbia Center for Youth Violence Prevention at Columbia University joined forces to release a collaborative report summarizing youth sexual and dating violence in New York City. Of the 133 youth who self-identified as having experienced sexual or dating violence, an overwhelming 72% told a friend first, while a mere 13% told a parent first. So in knowing this, we see that it's definitely skewed towards telling a friend immediately before confiding in a parent. And after telling a friend, many youth go on to tell even more friends. And overall, 88% in total told at least one friend at some point about the violence, and 1/4 told a parent. So you can actually see these distributions illustrated graphically on the screen. And because youth are more inclined to tell their friends and peers, it's absolutely critical to equip youth with the tools to be peer advocates and mentors. So while many programs do engage youth, as we know, in conversations around sexual and dating violence, we really need to take things one step further. We need to build youth leadership capacity so that youth can become instrumental agents of change and that they can help their friends if they're ever put in this situation. So we want and need youth to be informed and knowledgeable so that they can act as a resource for other youth in need. And also for those who are interested in the other outcomes of this report, the report is available on our website and will also be accessible via the supplemental resource guide that goes with this presentation. So when we decide to commit to something, we first want to know what the potential benefits are. So I'm sure most people are thinking, well, what's in it for our program? What's in it for our community? If we do this, if we decide to engage youth, what is the larger benefit? And in today's world of limited funding, that kind of thinking totally makes sense. So in this slide, we're actually going to summarize some of the benefits to programs and the benefits to youth. And one of the benefits to programs is that you can usually get more community recognition and buy-in by engaging youth. And one of the main things that I think is extremely important, is that programs can also get a glimpse into how youth think. What topics are important to them? What's the best way to teach youth? How can we reach out to them? What's relevant? What do they care about? So by engaging youth as leaders, you're kind of making sure that they're constantly giving feedback, and you're getting feedback from the target group. So it's a great way to check and assess whether or not something is completely outdated or whether it will resonate with young people. Because as we all know, youth culture is always changing, and this is a great way to stay in touch with what's relevant to youth. Also, as we mentioned before, youth learn better from other youth. They're more likely to absorb the information and behaviors if they're being taught by someone who is relatable and appears to be similar to them. Finally, you're building the capacity for youth leadership and giving youth a chance to do meaningful work in their community as agents of change, which overall is beneficial to programmers and youth. So it's great for individual self-esteem building and helps young people feel like they're really making a difference and that their contribution really matters. And this is super empowering, and young people are often really inspired by this, and they really want to become involved once they kind of like get some exposure initially. A lot of times they want to keep being involved, which speaks a lot to sustainability. And also it really helps with confidence boosting among youth. And in addition to that, youth can learn useful life skills like how to communicate, how to work as a team, and they also become more informed and educated decision makers, which is great because we want them to be advocates for their own sexual health. We want them to be able to make decisions that they feel comfortable with. And so in hearing all of this, I hope that it becomes a little more apparent as to why we as preventionists need to engage youth and build their capacity as leaders. We can't simply just have them in our audience. We need active involvement, and we need to foster and cultivate leadership.
Thank you. Please stand by.
Next question, we encourage you to participate by typing your answers in the text chat window. In your opinion, what are the characteristics that define an effective youth engagement or leadership program? Okay, so anyone want to type in a response? Okay, Lauren says youth stay engaged over a period of time. Yes, we will be talking about retention and keeping participants involved because there's a lot of dropout with some of these youth programs because of various obstacles, but that's definitely one that's a marker of a program that's exemplary. Leanne says youth recruit other youth to join. Great example. Caitlin says created in collaboration with youth. Both of those are fantastic examples, and we will talk about programs where they get youth feedback on the curriculum and implementation. Chantel says one in which youth feel engaged in the decision making and are treated as equal partners in creating programming. So that echoes the sentiment before. Jennifer says being current with topics that are interesting to youth. And that actually really relates to what Chantel and Caitlin were saying before, in where it's really important to get youth collaboration, buy-in, and feedback because you want to be covering topics that youth care about. And finally, Christina says youth recruited from the community served. Of course, you want to actually mold your program to serve a specific demographic that you're targeting. And Anna says youth report some behavior changes by them or their friends. Great, and we'll actually speak more about that when we talk about evaluating programs. So thank you all for participating. So we are really excited to be joined by our guest speakers today. We have Jennifer Rauhaus of Peer Solutions, and Jennifer will be discussing Stand and Serve, a program that she created to foster youth mentorship and advocacy. And we have Eli Chevalier, who is also representing Stand and Serve. And he's a high school student who serves as a peer educator and mentor for the program. We have Mira Youssef, who is the executive director and co-founder of Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa, and she'll be discussing Generation 1, a youth empowerment program with two components, the API Youth Council and the Peer-to-Peer Advocates Group. And finally, we'll have Nefertiti Martin, community organizer at Girls for Gender Equity, who will speak about the youth leadership program, Sisters in Strength. So I want to issue a warm welcome to all of our guest speakers. Thank you for joining us. We're so honored to have you here. Okay, so first, we are going to start with Eli. Eli, are you there? Okay, Eli, if you're there, press *7 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi, Eli. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So just to reintroduce yourself, Eli is the high school student and peer mentor for Peer Solutions. So thank you so much for joining us today, Eli. So you've worked with Stand and Serve for quite some time. And as a peer educator, can you briefly talk about the Stand and Serve program model and what its goal is?
All right. So essentially, Peer Solutions, we try and cultivate safety, equality, and respect as norms, as societal norms, in order to prevent the underlying causes of sexual violence before they exist, before they happen. And this is how we implement primary prevention. And the underlying causes of violence, we believe, are oppression, silence and denial, and violence or harm that's perceived as normal. So basically, safety, equality, and respect is the opposite of oppression, silence, and denial, violence perceived as normal. And so Stand and Serve, which is a program developed out of Peer Solutions, we use that to cultivate safety, equality, and respect as norms to prevent all of this bad stuff before it begins, because if oppression, silence, and denial, and violence perceived as normal, if those are norms, then that's how violence begins and, yeah, where it happens.
Okay, great. So as a preventionist, and as you just mentioned, we talk a lot about norms change and how to cultivate it and how to get at the root of the problems. So can you tell us about the Stand and Serve model and how it's made to address that and what activities it consists of?
All right. Well, we have weekly Stand and Serve high school lunch meetings, and I attend these because there's a Stand and Serve program at my high school. And basically, you know, we have monthly themes. Once a month we do outreach. We'll have meetings and address issues that are important to us, and we'll do activities, or we'll sit and talk about things that are important to us. But it's really important that we create safe spaces in all of these meetings, in everything that we do, and that's one of our main goals. We also have weekly Stand and Serve meetings at elementary schools, at post-secondary schools, and we have after-school meetings, and this is where peer mentoring goes on, where we have peer educators. So this is when high school students will teach the middle school students after school, and we have a summer program, which I'm going to go to right after this, and that is with, you know, people of all ages. We have a couple college kids. There's, you know, me and some other high schoolers, and middle school students, which also features the peer education component. We have monthly Stand and Serve coalition meetings for students, family, and community members. This is kind of, where we reach out further, because in the previous two, this is That's where we focus on students, and in our coalition meetings, we really reach out into the greater community and make relationships that way. Our Guts to Be Good campaign was actually developed out of our Stand and Serve coalition meetings, our initiative. And then throughout all of these meetings, we also have ongoing evaluation. We have biannual days at the Capitol where we, talk with legislators and do stuff like that. We have service projects, like I said earlier, monthly prevention campaigns on campus, and those are kind of like awareness themes for each month for different issues. Annual potlucks and celebrations. Also, a lot of times the high school students will go to the community garden, and so we really just try to develop relationships everywhere throughout our communities and with families and businesses, etc.
That's so cool. So you spoke a little bit about what kind of activities you do. And as a peer educator, can you tell us about what your training experience is like and what it consists of and any sort of frameworks or models that set the foundation for it?
Yeah. So actually, I received the title a little bit ago. I was sitting around with Jen, and I'm like the peer ed coordinator / the volunteer coordinator. And so I kind of, know how training for peer ed goes, and I led a peer ed hour yesterday. So we have, for our meetings throughout the year, we have high school meetings on Tuesday, and we have middle school meetings facilitated by high schoolers on Wednesday. So the meeting that's just high schoolers on Tuesday, we use that to prep for our meeting the next day. And we also do activities in our high school meetings, of course, but we use a lot of that time to talk about anything that comes up about working with middle schoolers. If there's an issue or if we want to go about doing something a different way, we use our Tuesday meeting to talk about that in a space that is, good for doing that.
And what about the curriculum?
For the middle schooler?
For the training. What kind of
for the
training do you do?
Well, also, when you apply to be a peer ed, there is a training session that goes on. So we have our 12 peer ed training models. We have curriculum for after school and high school. And then our agendas for training days and meetings, we review every single thing that we're going to do with the middle schoolers. And we also, when you're training someone who's going to facilitate meetings, we also discuss, like what to do in the event of this and this, because we were being, positive leaders, positive role models, and it's really important that we are aware of that. And we use our curriculum for everything that we do, on our anti-oppression framework and everything that we do to kind of, promote safety, equality, and respect as norms.
Great. So it seems like you, as peer advocates and mentors, are really actively involved in creating the curriculum and the training and the agenda. Is that correct?
Right. And we always, after a meeting goes on or on our Tuesday meetings, or we have the summer program, we have an hour before each meeting. So our meetings start at 2, peer eds come at 1. And I led that yesterday because one of our program coordinators was sick, and it was really cool. And we set up for everything. We discuss, who's going to do what, and we review, how things go with the younger kids. If they like it, if they don't, what's effective. We don't want to do things that aren't effective. We don't want to do things that are boring. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it seems like as one of the activists in the group, it gives you a lot of opportunity to really get involved and feel empowered. Can you talk about what that experience has been like for you?
Yeah, for sure. And this is one of the most important aspects of Stand and Serve and of Peer Solutions of my life. Stand and Serve and working with the people that we do and doing the things we do, it really gives me the tools that I need to be heard. It gives me the tools that I need to make social change where I see that it should be made. Because I've been in Stand and Serve, I have gotten like several speaking engagements like this, for example. The reason I'm talking right now on this is because I have Stand and Serve, and I speak at colleges. I speak at a lot of other places about things that are important to me. You know, not just Stand and Serve, not just preventing sexual violence. Those are things that are important to me, but I can talk about other things. In our meetings, we really create a space where we can talk openly about anything. I've always felt accepted. I always feel supported in everything that I do, and I can talk with my program coordinators about anything. They truly are some of my best friends, my most trusted adults. I tell them everything that goes on with my life. I don't feel scared to talk about things that are going on in my life. I really feel supported. We talk openly and honestly about sexual violence, about any issue that is going on.
Well, it definitely sounds like you're a really big part of the team, and it definitely sounds like a really great program. And I want to thank you for presenting in this and for giving us the opportunity to hear about your individual experience. So thank you, Eli.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so in that same vein, we have Jennifer Rauhaus, and she's also part of Stand and Serve. And so welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
So community mobilization is obviously a large component of your program, as we heard from Eli. So what are some of the youth-based community mobilization strategies that you guys employ to initiate change and do prevention work in the community?
Well, you know, we're kind of nonstop in the community doing activities, but as Eli mentioned so brilliantly, awesome, Eli, I love you, they developed the Guts to Be Good, and these are really 5 simple ways that you can cultivate safety, equality, and respect as norms to prevent sexual violence in everyday language that every single person can do. And so, excuse me, we broke it down to these 5 simple things. So it's the guts to be respectful, honest, courtesy, speak up, and lend a hand. And while those seem really basic, you break them down and you can really see how we're doing this really deep norm change on community levels. In addition to that, we do biannual days at the Capitol. And those are events where we bring together youth, family, communities, everyone of all ages, community partners, business partners, to come together as one voice to really look at, again, how can we develop real, authentic strategies in the community by and for the people to prevent sexual violence and all these harms, and develop these authentic relationships with legislators and our students. And when we talk about the legislative work we do, and I don't want to go on because unfortunately for you all I could, but the most important thing is building authentic relationships and not caring what side of this fence that they fall in, but making sure that we're inclusive. Because our students never say to us, are they Democrat, Republican? Our students say we want to make the world a better place. We want to make real change. So we have these events at the Capitol to demystify that fact and make it open to everybody because it's our Capitol. And then we do ongoing community service events. We definitely jump in when there's a tragedy locally or nationally or internationally. One year our students raised $8,000 for medical supplies for Haiti. So we're very, very present in the community, and we celebrate and we have fun, but we include everybody. I'll stop on that.
Okay. No, that's really, really informative. So you talked about some of the activities that you do, but what are some of the key elements that help your program remain sustainable and successful?
You know, that's my favorite question because I've really spent, 30-something years doing this work and started Peer Solutions 18 years ago with and really by and for the communities we serve. And I have spent an enormous amount of time trying to figure out what are the most effective strategies humanly possible to maximize generational change. Because we all know that sexual violence after the fact is just too damn late, and we're sick of it. And our kids are getting harmed, and it has to end. So I have literally, and because I've started a nonprofit and I don't have my hands tied, I've really been able to go and flow and really listen and really look at the science-based strategies, positive youth development, but also see it in practice of what works. And I'm telling you, this is what works for us. And I strongly encourage it for others. Ongoing, ongoing, ongoing. These little go in, do a presentation, and leave stuff needs to, I think, exit the building because it's so much money and time and effort, but it doesn't create that year-round. We're changing our culture. Not only are we doing these individual level strategies, we need to think pre-womb. We need to think of a world that we really want to live in where these are norms, for instance, safety, equality, and respect, on every level of that ecological model. Your introduction was brilliant, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer.
I loved it. But yeah, listen, people, and that our young people are the ones that see and hear and know what's really going on. I mean, your stats like, duh. I mean, why isn't every single primary prevention program on the planet using young people? And I understand the challenges, but when you look at how easy and really cost-effective and fun it can be, you want to do it. Make sure your stand and serve members, obviously, serve on your board, have an equal voice. We don't play hierarchy. We don't play patriarchy, not even within our own organization. We all have different jobs to do. We do them. We don't care how old you are. And that's another thing about youth programming. You ask our young people, and I've learned this over the years, what do they like most? They like that it can be all ages. I mean, I'm a 49-year-old, way more misbehaved than all the students at events person. But like you'll get your business people, your politicians, your young ones, your old ones, your every kind of person you can imagine of every kind of identity. And you want to get boys and men in our movement. This is the way you do it. Our gender balance, we don't even try. It's equal. Our identity balance, every kind of identity you can imagine, we don't even try because we're naturally diverse and we start so young and are so inclusive of everyone. And then also to really keep it going, and I've gone on and off and on and off on this to the point where I've taken money out of my own pocket. Sorry, Eli. But once in a while to pay peer ed stipends because valuing that, and these kids are so busy, and in today's economy, they have nothing, and their families have nothing. And, we're primary prevention, cultivate all this good stuff, but that doesn't mean we are not dealing with the horror every single day. So there you go. I'm done. I could go on and on. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. That was really thorough. And while we're kind of like on that same topic about sustainability and the challenges that you face in keeping a program going, I'm sure a lot of the people that are on this call right now can relate, and sustainability is a primary challenge. So with any successful program, what type of barriers have you encountered while trying to implement it?
It's ironic and weird, but one of my biggest barriers is people really not wanting young people at the table, and I've had to accept this. Their ideas are better and smarter and fresher and more sustainable. They bring we have families now that are with us. So I think that's a barrier, is really not including the young people. Don't have meetings at 10 a.m., coalition meetings during the school year. Have meetings when kids can go. So that's been a barrier. Also, of course, primary prevention funding, much less sexual violence primary prevention funding, which is my heart and soul, just hardly exists. There's the RPEP, CDC funding. There's no national funding. It's horrible. The economy has now been one of the biggest barriers ever over the last few years, which I know everyone's nodding their head. I mean, the food money, everything is just consultant money. Everything's gone. And then there's this still mentality that they don't get the cost effectiveness of creating the change you want to see, and maybe we could stop this before it happens, you think? So now our kids are having kids, and it's awesome, and it does work, but the economy isn't making it any easier when our students' cupboards are bare like they weren't before. And I've been doing this long enough to know that our students aren't eating, and that makes problematic. And obviously, but I need to stress this so loudly and so clearly, is that males and females in Arizona in grades 8 through 12 are experiencing equal rates of victimization and perpetration for sexual violence and dating violence. We have normalized this crap so much that it doesn't matter anymore what identity you're coming from. Everybody's taking everybody out, which is why Arizona has one of the highest suicide ideation rates in the freaking country. And we keep normalizing this, and there's no understanding and support and creating this safe space for everybody. So we've got to change our culture, our generation. So we do the individual level stuff, but we are now, cranking our young people into thinking about becoming politicians and how does that work. And I'll tell you what, you have asked me that 10 years ago. And I would have denied this day ever coming. But I'm listening to Eli. Who doesn't want Eli for president? I do. Okay, I'm done.
I completely agree. I think that what you're doing is really great, and as we talked about in the intro, the normalization is an issue, so getting youth while they're young is really effective. But in terms of mentioning the economy as a challenge and funding, a lot of us as preventionists would agree that most of the time we would love to implement an exciting program, but due to limited funds, we're not able to. So what are your tips for programs that might have limited funding, but they want to incorporate youth leadership into their existing prevention work?
Do I have, how many minutes do I have, like 2 or 1? Or I'm not watching
about
much.
2.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to say.
Oh, you have about 5, actually.
Oh, good. Okay. I just wanted to say quickly that our 8th graders are experiencing the highest rates of all of those issues, including bullying and cyberbullying. And so when you look at the average percentages, they're horrible, but go look at your 8th grade stats in New York and find out, and you might have already done this, and compare those to your high school students, and you're going to see an even deeper problem where you've got 50% of your kids doing some of this stuff, where in the general pop it's 24. It's really terrifying. So back to the youth leadership tips and low budget. Again, I've had to become a pro at this, and I'll tell you, I love starting a coalition and holding it in free spaces and having it once a month or whatever works for you, and bring together people that already care. I don't care who they are, but make sure it's after school. Bring the young people. I've been on, 49. I've been on a few of these in my life, and I'm telling you, my favorite ones are the ones facilitated by and for young people, that adults come that don't care, like me, that act less behaved than the kids, but that are there, they don't care, where there is no identity or age limitation, but where it's really youth-driven. You will see, and it's free. You can we have the Phoenix Public Library giving us the most beautiful space. We're looking at the mountains in our meeting. We have Starbucks donating food every week out of the Starbucks cases for free. And any of you that knows how hard it is to get anything, we have Domino's donating. So we're doing that. Also, don't pay for programs. Do not pay for canned programming. Design your own. Let your coalition design what you do. Don't beat your head on a wall trying to get into a school and spend, 3 months just trying to get one presentation. Start talking about, build relationships with, hang out with people that really care about culture shift and community change. Find out who's already doing it. Also, are there people at your schools because schools are still great. Don't run away from schools, because that's where your kids are. That's where your young people are. But think about meetings during lunch and after school. Ask the kids what works best for them. Ask them what day is best. You go in and you can do little workshops. You can go, and also or I don't know if you know, but schools with the highest percentages of bullying, usually the school staff has the highest percentage of bullying. So if you've got issues around bullying, and sexual bullying, is one of the highest forms of bullying. So that's a high-risk area, but obviously, every area is high risk. But when you think about having so little time and money, it's building the authentic relationships, building the ongoing sustainable stuff like coalition meetings where you get stuff donated. You know, days at the Capitol are free. We don't pay one single penny for that stuff. And it's really quite amazing. And I think that I just lost my slide where I was at. But I also think looking at school clubs that are already going on, are there diversity clubs? Are there anti-oppression clubs? What sort of work is already being done in the community, and hook up with them? But I do think that building your own initiative and just using what you have makes it sustainable. And then think forever. I mean, we have a phrase, once a stand and serve member, always a stand and serve member, and it's true. I'm still in contact with the little babies who aren't babies anymore from 18 years ago, and even students I taught before that. So, yeah.
So, I know you were mentioning that, you know, funding can be a challenge, and I'm sure that a lot of people can attest to that. But what most people can agree on is that evaluation is actually very useful and almost key sometimes to secure funding. In addition, it also helps measure the success of a program. So, you know, we discussed that before, but what kind of evaluation tips do you have for people? Because a lot of times people shy away from this topic because it's a little intimidating at first.
Yeah, and I would say, number one, we all want to know what we're doing is working. This is the beauty of running your own nonprofit. When you find out something doesn't work, you pitch it. When you learn naming myths and stereotypes reinforces them, you don't do it anymore, that kind of stuff. So you have to have an evaluation component of some sort. My tip would be never, ever, ever stop learning, because I am so a baby at this, even though I've been doing it for so many years. I say you got to get beyond knowledge and attitude and really get to some behavior and social norm change research and evaluation. I don't know what that looks like, but what we do is we have a lot of pre-post assessment. We're working right now with the Arizona Department of Health with Carol Hensel to work on a middle school pre-post assessment that we're doing. You know, our program is year-round, but we have fall semester and then spring semester and then summer, so we do 3 little pods of preing and posting and comparing, and we are doing a tool, and we piloted it, and now we're officially testing it. One new thing that came up too was retrospective surveys, and I'm really loving that. So before you came into the program, we wrote one that, you know, piloted and changed because I didn't write the questions in the right order. But I actually have a student now helping us, Samantha, kind of make better retrospective surveys. But we include our POP, everyone around, in our surveys and our curriculum writing and lessons and updating. But that's kind of fun to do with parents and family members as well. We always survey our family members because the first time I did that, I was shocked. The students go home. They talk about what they did and what they learned. And then, of course, they bring their family members to our events. And they're just as much stand and serve members as their kids are, and they love the messages, and we're positive and fun. And so it's really good to hear from your family members the impact. We're also right now working with the Department of Health on an official SurveyMonkey, because they all have the mucky muck stuff to do it right, to survey schools that we work with on a regular basis and not so regular basis to see, you know, do you like our monthly staff memos? Do you want more of them? Do you want the blah, 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 the stuff we do and don't do? Because we school staff monthly with resources and invite them to activities on different topics to help them, because there's so few resources out there. And then we do a lot of community-based needs assessment as well, where we'll take, you know, all the general crime stats and the youth survey stats, and then we work with the Department of Economic Security as well, and they do beautiful mapping with us about crime and schools and things. So we kind of do anything you can, super comprehensive, but I've yet to find any kind of holy grail in evaluation methodology. I do have a couple people I'm working with that are geniuses.
Jennifer, actually, someone just typed in a text chat question.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah, so Lauren says naming myths and stereotypes reinforces them. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's something that, you know, and you all have done this before too, but where you go to trainings and they list all the horrible words about the horrible groups of people that are out there. You're not horrible groups of people, but groups of people that are out there, and they say these names, and some of them you've heard and some of them you haven't, and you're just like, it actually, I mean, from your own gut reaction and my personal gut reaction to that, it just kind of makes you feel bad. And I don't have the article in front of me, and I do have a really great article, and I can look for that and find it. But I remember reading years ago that when we say a myth and we say a stereotype, that we actually reinforce it, because if you think of the negative, that's what sticks in your head. Somebody tells you, 100 comments, one's negative, 99 are positive, you're going to think about the negative. So when you put the negative out there, that's what sticks. And I also remember kids going through that Anytown Unitown training and being kind of traumatized from it, because they would be learning names for racist names that they didn't know existed. And then also, when we say it, we put it in people's heads. So instead of saying 2% of people lie about being raped, what we can do is flip it and say, did you know that 98% of the people that are talking about sexual violence are actually telling the truth? And even if the 2% out there that aren't, they need help probably more. And everyone needs help. And, so it's just a way of reframing it, so it's also a little bit more positive and a little bit more inclusive. Because also these myths are regional. Some of them are really outdated. And I'm not sure that we need to spend as much time on that as we need to spend time on the bigger picture, which is cultivating what is good.
Right. Well, if you do happen to find that article, definitely send it to me, and I'll include it in the resource guide that I'll send out to everyone who's on the webinar right now.
Yeah, and I'll figure out a way to say it better, because I don't like how it.
Okay, definitely.
But you can see it. Think about how you feel. Like, let's hear the good.
Okay, and
we don't need to hear one more bad thing about anything.
Well, we have one more question that Jennifer will answer right now, but then we'll also have questions at the end. Mary says, what kinds of questions do you ask in the retrospective survey?
Did you volunteer in your community before you joined Stand and Serve as a Benign One? We might say something like, how often... I have one right in front of me.
So it's sort of like what they did prior to participating in the program. Okay.
And then what do you do now? Like first we ask like how long they've been in Stand and Serve, and we get a grip. But before you joined Stand and Serve, you demonstrated safety as the norm every day, once a week, once a year, never. After you joined Stand and Serve, how often do you demonstrate equality as the norm?
Okay, so that makes sense. Previous behavior.
Yeah.
All right.
Pre and post. And I haven't perfected this, but somebody just gave me the idea, and I thought, that's some cleverness.
Yeah, that's really useful. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. And if anyone feels like they have any more questions for Jennifer, please feel free to type them in the text chat window, and then we'll address them in the last 15 minutes of the presentation. But for now, thank you, Jennifer, so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I love the direction you're going.
Thank you. Okay, so our next guest speaker is Mira Youssef, and she will be discussing the issues faced by immigrant youth and the challenges that they face and ways to circumvent some of these barriers. So welcome, Mira.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
maybe
perfect.
just a little bit louder.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
So can you briefly describe your youth engagement program, the Monsoon Generation 1, which consists of the API Youth Council and the peer-to-peer advocates, and also just your organization as a whole so we can become acquainted with it?
Okay, so Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa is a community-based and a culturally specific organization in Iowa, and we are serving survivors and victims of domestic violence and sexual violence. So we are a dual program that specifically provides services to the Asian and Pacific Islander communities in Iowa. And then our main office is in Des Moines, and that serves the central and western Iowa. And then we have satellite office in Iowa City, serving the campus of University of Iowa in eastern Iowa. So in addition to this service provision, we also have programming that includes community education, outreach, and then our violence prevention program that focuses on the youth, and then technical assistance. So specifically for our youth programming, we have the Generation 1 Youth Council and also our API Youth Peer-to-Peer Outreach and Advocate. And what had happened is the Generation 1 API Youth Council was established by 9 8th graders who participate in our community assessment back in 2008. And then because in 2008, we're just basically starting. So in order for us to really figure out what our programming will look like, we decided to do a community assessment. And in order to have a really to be inclusive, we decided to use, we basically decided to include the youth. So when we were doing community assessment specifically for the youth, we have used Photo Voice as a method to basically assess what the youth perspective on gender roles and gender-based violence in the API community in Des Moines, Iowa. So basically the community assessment allowed us to include the youth and also for the youth to take lead on our youth program. But before I continue talking about our youth programming, I just want to kind of just talk about that there are Asians in Iowa, that Iowa is basically the first state to resettle refugees from Southeast Asia after the Vietnam War. So the first refugees to arrive in Iowa are from Laos in late 1970s, and then refugees from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam were resettled between late 1970s to early 1980s. And then today, refugees are still coming in from Burma, Nepal, Bhutan, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So we have this, huge population of refugees coming from Asia. But in addition to the refugees from Asia, we also have this history of Asians who are arriving as professionals and also wives of military men. So today, a large number of women from Asia, specifically from the Philippines and China, are arriving as fiancés of men living in Iowa, and they do not meet through the mail order bride anymore. They meet through personals via the internet. So now we have a lot of also interracial children. So we have a lot of multiracial children who are also part of the program. In addition to that, there are also multi-ethnic children who might be half Lao or half Thai Dam or half Lao and half Cambodian or half Vietnamese. So we have all those multi-ethnic, multiracial youth that we are working with. And we are also noticing a lot of the class divisions, because if we're talking about the South Asian population, these are immigrants who are coming from the professional class, or they might be doctors, or coming in the IT industry, or maybe the engineering. And then we have the refugee communities who are still in poverty, and some might have been have moved to better neighborhoods, but still some of them live in a very poor neighborhood and are not safe. So these are basically the population that we work with.
So can you now talk about the specific population that the Youth Council works with?
Okay, so our youth programming is just in Des Moines, Iowa, which is the largest number of Asian population are living in Des Moines. And the majority of the youth that we are working with are Southeast Asians, and they are mostly children of the former refugees who came in maybe in their adulthood, or maybe they came in when they were 12, or some of them are 1 year old. So we have the first generation, second generation youth. So you will have this intergenerational multi-generational issues that also coming up when we're working with these youth. And then the majority of them are middle school to high school students. And then historically, what's interesting about our program is the majority of the participants are boys. So that is basically the demographics who we're working with.
Okay, and so what about the peer-to-peer advocate program? kind of involved in that?
So the peer-to-peer advocate program came about when we have the council. So back in 2008, the 8th middle schooler who decided to say, hey, Mira, you know what? After this photo voice, we had so much fun. Can we create a council? And I thought that was excellent. So then we decided to kind of help them to create it. From the council, at first we called it advisory youth council, but that is not an authentic relationship because they're just advisory. That means that we are not really going to listen to what they're going to say because they're just advisory. So we decided to take out the advisory and just put it as youth council. And also we've decided to add a specific spot in our board that includes a youth that is going to be their voice, that will basically represent the youth, the API youth in Iowa. So the API Advocate and Outreach came about when we had extra money from our violence prevention program, and I decided to say, hey, let's use that money to hire 3 youth interns for the summer. And so we hired 3 youth interns, and that worked really well. So what we've done is we just did a contract with them to do certain projects. For example, they did our brochures. So from then, we decided like every grant that we apply for, we're always including a budget specifically for a youth position. So we applied for OVW grants, and through that grant, we basically got funded to hire 10 API youth peer-to-peer advocate and outreach for 2 years, for another 2 years when we receive another grant. So our peer-to-peer advocate and outreach, basically what they have done, it's a paid work, and the most that we had was back in 2008, we only had 2 to 3 youth advocates because of money. But then when we received more funding, we basically had 5 to 10 youth advocates per year. This year, we have only 2 to 3 youth advocates because of funding issue. And their main roles and responsibilities are basically they plan, they implement, and they evaluate our youth programming. So they are the ones who are basically heading the programming. So back in 2008 to 2011, we were basically had an in-school and after-school program, and they are the one who are creating the curriculum with the help from a staff. Creating the curriculum, they are the one who are facilitating and co-facilitating the sessions. They are also planning the different programming that we have every month, and then we also had the youth summit that they are planning and implementing. But then part of that work as well is evaluating. It's really important that they also evaluate their own work, so then they know that okay, this is not working for us, so therefore let's create another one, or let's make it better. So from there, we basically, in addition to the council and then the advocates, they kind of just work together in order to create a really a youth program specifically driven by the youth.
Okay, so then, you mentioned that funding was an issue. What are some of the other challenges that your specific population that you work with faces?
So the major issue that we've encountered is this is just for practical. It's like transportation issues, because we're living in Iowa where there is not, specifically Des Moines, there's not a really good public transportation in comparison to New York. I think, or maybe like parts of New York might be like maybe rural areas of New York or suburban area might be the same, will have the same problem. So we have that issues of lack of public transportation, and basically the need for the parents to drop off their children, but also that can be a struggle for the parents because some of these parents might be working 2 to 3 jobs, so it's hard for them to drop them off. So that's one challenge that we have. And another one is the participant engagement sustainability. And because of the immigration history of API in Iowa, there is major difference between the API communities in the East Coast or the West Coast. So these has basically had influenced the engagement. From the East and the West Coast, we have, I'm really from the Bay Area, so I kind of, San Francisco, so I understand how the Bay Area Asian community will be more active, will be more activist. They already know the issue. But in comparison to Iowa, which is a new community, doesn't really have this history of activism, so it limits, it's like they're basically starting from the very beginning. So so our challenge was like how to sustain their engagement, their participation in our programming. So that's why I think, and also the youth are doing a lot. They are busy with their after-school program. They have their own social life. So that's also been a challenge for us specifically. And then another issue that we've noticed was also the program sustainability funding issue. For example, if we've lost the sexual violence prevention funding, so it was not funded. So therefore, we have to kind of cut down. We've lost our sexual violence prevention staff. So we have to find other means in order to have an adult to monitor that program or to help them run the program in a lot of ways. And then also another challenge that we've had was also staffing. Finding a right person to work with the youth was really also a challenge because you cannot just like hire. For us, it was a challenge specifically in Iowa because there is not. It was just really not a lot of individuals from the API community who are interested in working with the youth. And also, like, how then do you make sure that the programming is innovative and really, and really youth-led and youth-included. So that was also a challenge, is finding the right staff.
Well, so with these challenges in mind, what solutions would you recommend for people?
So for transportation issues specifically, we've started to engage the parents, grandparents, and other family members. So what we've been doing is like we're not just creating a relationship with the youth, but we're also creating relationship with their parents. So we get to know their mothers, their grandmothers who are taking care of them. We invite them to our programs. We invite them to several events that their kids have participated. And through that, I think they have made the effort to like drop off their kids, to even like bring or volunteer to cook for a lot of our events. A lot of the parents are like volunteering to like, hey, let me cook, let me provide the food for this youth. And I think, and also part of what's so interesting about our programming as well, when we're including the parents or their guardians or anyone who's like our caregivers, they also are the one who begin to refer survivors or victims of domestic violence or sexual assault to our program because of our relationship with them, because they get to know what their children are doing. And what's also interesting is like one youth told us, one of our advocates and part of the council told me that her mom did not thought that Monsoon was a restaurant, that he was working in a restaurant. And then he finally like say, no, Mom, it's not a restaurant, it's this program. And he was like, oh, I thought it was a restaurant. They begin the conversation about like our work and about gender violence, about, just about different issues. So that also begins a conversation about different issues that might be affecting the community. And then another thing that we have done is that we have to make sure that it's youth-led projects. Instead of the adults making the decision in what program it will be, it should be the youth that should make the decision in those programming. Like it's similar to Stand and Serve. I think it's so wonderful that that we're basically it's the same program that we have with Stand and Serve. It's like it's very much youth-led and youth, and then they're the one who's implementing it. And then in addition to that, we basically included, make sure that in your budget that youth positions are included, even though it's just a little money. Maybe if you just have like maybe $2,000 just specifically for youth to work with you, I think that will be enough. Or even $1,000, just do a contract work with them. And also one of the things that we've done, since a lot of the youth that we're working with in the past are now in college or starting college or maybe looking for a part-time job, is we've decided to, like for example, to hire a former youth advocate to run the youth program. So now we basically have a youth that I have known since 6th grade to run it starting this fall. So that is also one thing that we're sustaining is through like if they are old enough to work for the organization full-time or part-time, it's just hire them.
So hiring youth and making sure that there are positions for them in the program speaks about sustainability. So can you talk about that a little bit and any suggestions for that?
So I think building authentic relationships with the youth and their families is really crucial. You know, it's like it's not just I think part of our community building is having those reciprocal relationships and not just coming into the community and say, I need you. Instead, it's like, what do you need from us to help you? And it's the same when you're working with the youth. Like, what do you need from us to make you so you can be successful, or so you can do stuff, or you can go to college, or whatever that you need to do to be successful. And then it's also important that we include the youth in the planning of the youth programming. And by doing that, it's asking them, okay, what are your interests? What about your peers? Do you think this will work? Do you think this project will work? How can we get the youth to participate? What are the just asking them, like having this conversation with the youth is really important. And then I think the most important thing is willing to make mistakes and also learn from those mistakes, and then just constantly evaluating your programming. Is this working? Is this not? And asking them every time that, like after we create for example, if we have the youth summit, we usually evaluate it together to say, okay, what worked and what didn't work, and what can we do next year to make it better. And I think one thing that we've also learned in the past is like because we were in school, it was easier for us to recruit youth. But since we are not in school, it's also been a struggle. So then we have to create a way to recruit more kids, besides going to the school. So that is basically our challenge this fall, and our youth, our new youth staff will basically, that's our challenge.
So in speaking about youth-led strategies and getting them to have a say in the program, can you talk about the strategies that you use with working with youth?
So one thing that we've used at first it was funded by we've used the violence prevention programming as a way to include the youth as a strategy. So since Monsoon was getting sexual violence prevention money, we used that specifically to hire youth to be part of the program. So I think it's important that, and then violence prevention, it doesn't mean it's just sexual violence, but it could also be any form of violence specifically for communities that are marginalized in the past. Because in our community, there's also gang violence, there's also domestic violence, there's dating violence. So therefore, it's not just sexual violence that we're dealing with, but also any forms of violence that the community might have had experience. And also, it's important that community engagement is another strategy that we have used. I think for me, like when we think about violence prevention, for me it's really community engagement or community outreach, community education. For us, it's all the same concept. It's just different terms. So for us, community engagement is really, really crucial in working with youth because they will be the one that will change those norms in creating in ending violence against women, because they will be the one who should be leading it. Because so therefore, we have to engage them at a very early age in order to have social change.
Right, and speaking about community engagement and the different types of violence that can affect communities, can you speak about the impact that the program has had on the community and youth members?
There has been an increased awareness of not only sexual assault or sexual violence, but other issues that's connected to it. For example, the youth had been, and this is also connected with engagement between parents and between communities, because when the youth started working with us, we started talking about migration issue, like how did your parents come to the United States, or what was the war in Vietnam was about, and what was the experience during the migration as a refugee, and also like as a refugee living in Iowa where it's like 93% white. So therefore, like they started like thinking about that. I think it was very important for them to then they started asking their parents, it's like, hey, what is your history? What is our history? So they started kind of having more a conversation between generation of like the story of the parents, because they started becoming curious about their parents and not being embarrassed because their parents might not speak English or might be living in a poorer neighborhood. So I think learning from their parents, the history of the parents, they become more conscious of like their own history and the struggle of their own family and communities. I think that's one thing that we have seen. And then also a lot of the kids that we've talked to, whenever, like, part of our evaluation is not just by tests, but also discussing with them, like, okay, what's going on, you know? So one of them basically had said, you know what, I asked my mom about our story and like how did we come here and what was their life when they first come. And then when he told me about the story, he said, you know what I've learned is like I have more respect for my mom, and they've gone through much, but then I know that they're still surviving and they still have hope. And then he even brought his mom and his parents to one of our events and no longer embarrassed about his mother. And then another thing that had happened as well is I just received an email from one of our former API Youth Council member who kind of just disappeared for a minute and never showed up in any event. And then she emailed me saying, oh, by the way, you know, I've decided that I'm queer. I was going through so much at that time. I apologize for just dropping out, but now I'm ready, and I thank you for everything that I've learned through Monsoon about feminism, about my own gender identity, and I just want to thank you. And for us, that's also part of the evaluation. If they come back to us and say, hey, you know what, I appreciated that, and I've learned so much. So I think that's one thing that the impact that we're seeing specifically in Iowa, and I think those small things might be like might be not important to some people, but for us who are like organizing in Iowa specifically, that is like a lot. That means a lot for us.
Right. So just to wrap up, you did speak a lot about historical factors, immigration issues, personal narratives, and constituency-specific issues and their story. You did mention that.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the framework that laid the foundation for this program?
So one of our core values at Monsoon is about social justice. So everything that we do is infused with social justice. We have to basically do everything with intention that our root is social justice and anti-oppression. So when we talk about during our meetings even, it's very, it's non-hierarchical. I can never pronounce that word. It's non-hierarchy. We ask them, we value their opinions. We basically, when they say, hey, Mira, this will work, and then we have to follow through. So everything that we do in our organization is basically rooted in social justice because that's our core values. So every time that we have programming, we always ask, how is this going to affect certain people? And how do we make sure that every voices are heard? Okay?
Right. Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Mira. We really appreciate it. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to text them in the text chat window, and we'll address them at the end. And thank you so much, Mira. Your program is really inspiring. So now our last speaker is Nefertiti Martin, and she will be discussing community organizing strategies for high school students on behalf of Girls for Gender Equity. Hi, Nefertiti. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. So can you tell us a little bit about GGE, the mission, its vision?
So Girls for Gender Equity, well, for starters, we exist in Brooklyn, New York, but we serve folks throughout New York City. So we're committed to the physical, psychological, social, and economic development of girls and women through education, organizing, and physical fitness. We encourage communities to remove barriers and create opportunities for girls and women to thrive. So our vision is to a society with optimal physical, economic, and educational social systems to foster the growth and fulfillment of all its members. So we do this through our 3 core programs and multi-year campaigns. And through those programs are our health and fitness program, which due to funding has folded into our Urban Leaders Academy after school program for middle school youth, which is co-ed. And it duly provides academic enrichment and explores social justice through the arts. So young people will come to this program, and what they'll have, for example, test prep, and they'll also learn about clowning and how clowning has a social justice background. And then for the bulk of my presentation, I will be talking about our community organizing program, specifically our Sisters in Strength Youth Organizing program within that program. So,
right. So as the community organizer for GGE, you are involved in various community mobilization projects, like you said. So can you summarize these a little bit and tell us about them?
So in our community organizing, what we do is we mobilize youth and adults toward creating sustained change in their communities through educational campaigns, research, and direct action. So when we were doing health and fitness, we had gender respect workshops for the young women who would attend our basketball clinics. And then we also had a World Against Sexual Harassment campaign that focused on addressing sexual harassment in schools, and we continue to do organizing around sexual harassment in the school community for a preventative, from a preventative standpoint. And we do that through participatory action research, which is something that I'll speak more about as the slides progress. And we also have a coalition. We're the lead organizers of our Coalition for Gender Equity in Schools, which connects all folks in the school community, and we partner with other organizations like the Center for Anti-Violence Education and other organizations, the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault, actually, and we do workshops around addressing sexual harassment in the school community, as well as advocating for uniform implementation of current policies like Title IX, which is federally mandates that there shouldn't be sexual harassment in any school, any public school in the U.S.
So Sisters in Strength is one of your main core programs, and it does have a strong leadership component. Could you tell us a little bit about SIS? What population does it target, and can you just describe some general features?
Yes. So Sisters in Strength Youth Organizing Program is a 2-year program for 15 young women of color entering either the 10th or the 11th grade, and it's open to all young women in New York City schools, whether you go to public or private school. It's open to young women of color. And so the program itself is shaped by the needs and interests of the youth organizers, and it's also shaped by GGE's vision, mission, and goals. So when we're saying shaping their needs, we look at it through addressing some of the self-advocacy and youth leadership development that they identify, and I'll talk a little bit more about how they identify it. So we address the spectrum of gender-based violence and confront the multiple layers of individual and institutional discrimination that threaten the safety of girls and women, especially as it relates to gender, race, and class.
So for this specific program, what type of techniques do you use for retention and recruitment? Do you provide any incentives to keep people engaged and enrolled in the program?
So we usually recruit during the spring, and we pull from schools and organizations that have received our what we like to call Hey Shorty workshops on sexual harassment, and what happens is those young women who actually have seen our work in the community, whether it be at an event or at a workshop, they're the most familiar and excited about being a part of our work, being potentially co-facilitating these workshops with their peers in the future. Um, so Oh, and so in this year, we have expanded the program into 2 years, from 1 year to 2 year, targeting specifically sophomores and juniors in high school, because most often we would get young women in their senior year of high school, and in New York City, a lot of the time, young people don't really get an opportunity to do a lot of things before their senior years in high school, and they have to scramble for extracurriculars, so because it looks good on their college application, and they're like that's when they start looking like a well-rounded individuals, and so guidance counselors really push for seniors to apply for things, in their senior year. But it becomes a challenge because it competes with them actually applying for college and filling out the applications and all of that, and the various senior activities that happen. So the 2-year expansion has allowed us to plant seeds for learning and identifying problems in which they desire to affect change, and then spend their second year planning and executing a well-informed community action-based project where the seeds that have been planted, we can actually watch them sprout and chart their growth over a longer span of time. So we infuse self-care and self-advocacy practice that aids in realizing their full potential at GGE and beyond.
So you talked about how expansion was one of the strategies that you came up with to kind of counteract one of the challenges, which was, people not having enough time for the program in just 1 year. What are other challenges that your specific target population face?
So what we, and a lot of this came up for other folks in the presentation, but getting people to get here. We acknowledge the fact that a lot of these young women have other responsibilities outside of just school. They have to go home and take care of siblings. They have to pick up siblings. They have to provide for their household, like help pay the light bill and things like that. So we provide stipends, but also trying to get here, the transportation, although the New York City transportation system is pretty good, they need the money to get here, so we offer a stipend and Metro cards as needed, because some folks, they live within walking distance, or everyone exists at a different point. And so another challenge we've also come across is sort of competing interests. So we understand that it's a huge time commitment, and I didn't mention the time commitment as of yet, but we require these young women to meet after school for 3 hours once a week, and then attend extra organizational events of our either our partner organizations or that relate to like a film festival or something that really relates to the work that they're learning about. And so some young women are really ambitious in juggling their responsibilities, and so they have to pick and choose what makes the most sense. So we're very transparent about requirements and what it is to commit to the other young women in the space and the program. And sometimes we have to accept that we're not the best fit for them, yet we support them in that decision-making process. And then I guess the third challenge that I would address is sort of academic issues. So we don't accept folks, because there is an application process, we don't accept folks on an academic or academic merit-based situation. We accept folks based on what they'll contribute to the group, how unique they are, and what they can gain from this experience. So oftentimes a young woman may not be performing as well as they can in school, or might need extra help, and so they have to miss the program due to these extra extraneous issues. So what happens is they might end up taking night classes that directly conflict with meeting times, or they might have to stay a little over school, and so we can lose them in that way. So some ways in which we try to remedy that issue is through, I work directly with a Master's of Social Work intern, and they provide one-on-one counseling for the young women. So we incorporate this direct service component in which they have about almost an hour-long session with the young women to support the development of the young woman as a whole person. She's not just a student. She's just not just a youth organizer. She has all these other things going on, and so we try to support them, and especially in emergency situations, because some of the young women are experiencing violence in their homes or what have you, and we are oftentimes the first people they even tell about whatever it is that they're experiencing while they're doing this work. And so we try to support them through connecting them to resources and providing that space for them. So the other piece is that we really emphasize developing bonds of sisterhood. And I recall one young woman saying, in this world, like having all this technology, she rarely has any time to really sit with a person face to face and talk about the issues that are pertinent and relevant to her lives. And so having that safe space is really important to them. And they also understand that they're connected to a network of over 50 other young women who have gone through this process and are resources. So some of the young women that have gone through the process actually return to provide support where they can. More specifically, more formally, we began a college and post-secondary prep and planning program in which former Sisters in Strength youth organizers co-facilitated a series of workshops and held one-on-one sessions for pre-college planning. And so once a youth organizer, always part of the GGE family and network, and we keep in touch for our annual reunion and other opportunities that come our way.
So in talking about inclusivity and expanding the program and trying to include a wide range of people, one of our participants asked, is the program open to young folks who identify as transgender young trans women?
So yes, the program is open to young folks that identify as trans. We adopted a policy. We have not had a openly trans identified young woman apply to the program, but we have definitely had that on our radar, and also when we do outreach, we definitely outreach to that population as well. So, and we have our expertise, we've been trained accordingly in how to connect with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks. So, but we have not yet worked with a young woman who identified as trans.
Great. That's actually, Kira says, GGE rocks. Thank you for answering my question. No, that's really great that the program is really inclusive. So in talking about the recruitment process, can you now tell us about the curriculum and what it consists of, how it was developed, things of that nature?
So the curriculum itself, I work specifically with the Masters of Social Work intern each year, and they help to co-facilitate, develop, improve, and concretize the curriculum for replication. So we co-facilitate the meetings, and each week we do a process evaluation after each lesson to review and constantly improve upon the content delivery. So the activities that we do span self-awareness, self-care, self-advocacy, community organizing basics, and community care, ultimately ending in an action project as determined by the young women. And we'll talk about what those projects have looked like. And a part of the curriculum, it consists of some of the products that we've developed and produced, which is Hey Shorty, Our Struggle with Street Harassment, which chronicles the experiences of young women of color experiencing street harassment in Central Brooklyn. And it's a youth-produced documentary that was created by former SIS youth organizers while they were here at GGE. And we also have a book of the same name, Hey Shorty, and it chronicles the past 10 years of our organizing work. So we've developed these teaching tools that we continue to utilize in our work. And so yes, we meet weekly for 3 hours, and we attend extra organizational events, and we also, and we'll talk more about how the youth actually have a say in the program.
Right. I was actually just going to ask that. So you mentioned that you work jointly with an MSW intern to devise the curriculum, but how involved are youth in the development and the implementation process? How much of it is participatory planning and being involved in that nature?
So in the beginning, we asked the young women to basically choose some topics that they want to focus on through a needs assessment, and this helps inform the content of the weekly meetings and even the events that we, encourage them to attend. So what happens is we have like a needs assessment, and then we have mid-year evaluation, and then beyond that we have like end-of-the-year evaluation. So participatory planning is critical because the young women must feel ownership and be invested in their experience. And as facilitator, I'm guiding them through the process, but there'd be no genuine process if not for their participation. So on GGE's end, we do a lot of pre-planning in terms of like structuring what the themes of the year might be and those sort of things, but it's also a very collaborative process in which we create systems for our and their benefit. For example, we have tasked the young women with buying healthy snacks for meetings, and then we realized that they weren't clear on what was and was not healthy. And healthy food in our community is really expensive, and they're given a small budget each week. So we found a happy medium in buying some snacks in bulk and encouraging the young women to go out and buy fresh fruits for each meeting. So that was something that we had to think through, and we do a lot of trial and error, and it's really awesome, but they are trusting the process and trusting us and guiding them through that process.
Right. So the basis of this is definitely youth empowerment. And I guess my next question for you is, how does the program serve as a catalyst for community mobilization or social change or advocacy? And can you share some examples with us?
So when thinking about community mobilization, I think about this framework of participatory action research. It's really, really crucial and critical to the way in which we do our work. It's the way. So with participatory action research, it is research done for the community, by the community. Most often, you'll hear about, so there was a study done by some experts somewhere in some college who said that, and the results of the study were that all these kids in the Bronx all the kids in the Bronx have like high rates of asthma. Boo-hoo, that's so sad. Wow, kids in the Bronx have asthma, but nothing actually is done about the issue. So with participatory action research, the members of the community get to identify what the problem is in their community, and our Sisters in Strength identified that street harassment, sexual harassment was a problem in their community. And then they conducted research. So the way in which they conducted research was doing a survey. They did a survey of about 1,200 middle and high school youth on the topic of sexual harassment in schools. And we learned through that survey that young people were able to identify what sexual harassment was because they didn't have that language. It was normalized. It was so heavily normalized and prevalent in the school community. So once we do the research, we had to go out and present the findings to the community. And the way that we decided to do that, the year that I was actually in SIS, because I was a Sisters in Strength organizer before I became employed with GGE, we did this Theater of the Oppressed work. And Theater of the Oppressed was a great tool for us to show the larger community, here are, and put faces and well, not just faces, but really experiences to the numbers and the data that we collected, and involving the community in determining some real strategies for action that needed to take place. So once we presented it to the community then decided, well, we all need to come together and do something about it, that on a legislative level, on various different levels. So that's how the action that took place was the development of the Coalition for Gender Equity in Schools, which I mentioned previously, which is a coalition designed to have different community-based organizations and members of the school community that are actually working in schools, like administration and teachers and parents, to come together and really and to figure out ways to end and address some of these issues of gender-based violence in schools. And so once that action takes place, in which we all agree on what that action would be, there's reflection and evaluation that happens, reflecting on the entire participatory action research process and evaluating, so to see what can be done further, what can we further investigate, what can we better understand about this process, and what are the next steps we need to take.
So that's really cool that the work that the youth did provided the impetus for this formation of the coalition. Can you talk about some other PAR projects that the youth were involved in recently that they have led?
Yes. So another result of PAR was our Title IX campaign. So as I mentioned before, Title IX of the Educational Amendment of 1972 to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits sexual harassment as a form of sex discrimination in U.S. public schools. So with Title IX, each school in New York City is supposed to have a Title IX coordinator, someone who is designated to receive reports from students about sexual harassment. We found that we did a survey and just simply called about 200 schools, and New York City has 1,700 schools, so getting to call 200 schools was like amazing. So we called 200 schools and simply asked them, do you have a Title IX coordinator? And only 10% of those schools actually could name or transfer us to the Title IX coordinator. So once we, did that whole survey, we presented those findings to the Department of Education and made serious recommendations, like, for example, listing the Title IX coordinator on the school's website. We made those recommendations to the Department of Education, and we actually had an audience with the Department of Education because they can be pretty shady, and they don't want to necessarily listen to you unless you are like, hey, this is this awesome thing that you did, and this is how awesome we're doing, and you're doing great. And it's really hard being that this Department of Education, New York City Public Schools, it's a really, really huge system that is a little broken, but there are people in the community doing really, really awesome work, and we want to support that work. Yeah.
Well, speaking of awesome work, it's incredible that this youth-driven research project basically initiated a whole policy advocacy, movement. That's really inspiring. I mean, in addition to that, what else do you think makes your program unique and valuable?
So I guess I'll just be echoing a lot of what other folks said was the intergenerational collaboration. Like when we went to the Department of Education, we went once and they were like, okay, whatever. And then we went another time with our parents of the Coalition for Gender Equity in Schools, and to be like, look, like we are standing in solidarity with the young women to uplift their voices. And at that point we were taken more seriously. And also, more recently, we did a youth summit on sex street harassment this past March, and then we had an international anti-street harassment rally where we had a youth contingency at the rally, showing up, being present, representing. And then we had an event prior to March, 1 Billion Rising, which was striking, dancing, and rising to address violence against women and girls internationally. So we were part of that international movement, and we held our own rising, our intergenerational rising, where we recorded a young woman speaking to an elder about her experience of violence and why she rises, and hearing the story from the elder of that was in the space. So having that, holding that safe space, not just for the young women to share, but also for their elder counterparts, for their male counterparts. We've held things like Bring Your Brother Day, because it's like we're talking to each other on a regular basis, but we're also preaching to the choir because we know what our experiences are like walking down the streets in schools. But it's awesome to really be able to reach across those intersections of identity and really have a full, rich conversation. And like I said, fun fact about me is that I used to be a youth organizer. So I've had many different roles here at the organization before becoming an employee and a community organizer, and now leading a cohort of us, or several cohorts of young women through this process. So my expertise was grown through the organization, but also they've allowed me the opportunity to really get to develop, to show my leadership, and then really develop a strong sense of what the needs are of young women of color, because I so identify with them.
That's really amazing that people who are involved as youth members could later be employed in the organization. And I think that's a really cool aspect of the program, and definitely speaks about the sustainability that we were talking about before. I want to thank you so much, Nefertiti, and to all our guest speakers, thank you so much for your contributions. They were so valuable and insightful. And actually, Jennifer commented that she loves the campaign that GGE is doing for Title IX and the policy advocacy movement. So that's really great. And for anyone else who has additional questions, we're about to wrap up, but you could type them in the text chat box, or alternatively, feel free to contact myself or the other guest speakers. You can email them directly, and we can also put you in touch with them as well. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we will be posting this presentation on our website, which is listed on the screen, and it will also be in our weekly digest in about a week or so. And we'll also send out a supplemental resource guide in case you have any other questions. So I'd like to thank everyone, and thank you so much for participating. Have a good day.
Thank you. Please stand by.